Welcome to Xhibition, an Xbox podcast, episode number 32. And on top of that, welcome to 2022. It is a brand new year filled with awesome possibilities and, of course, plenty of great games to play. And we'll be talking about those on today's show because we have another special episode of Xhibition. Last week, I talked about my top 5 Xbox moments of 2021, of which there were certainly plenty. We talked the highs and the lows. Definitely recommend you go back and check out that show if you have not had the chance to listen to it or watch it on YouTube. But this week, we are looking forward into the future, and I'm going to be talking about my top 5 most anticipated games of 2022. And of course, we are going to be focusing on the Xbox and third-party ecosystems, while I am totally looking forward to the Kirby game, Breath of the Wild 2, God of War. I'm not going to be talking about them too much on this show since it is an Xbox program, just to give you guys a heads up. But before we dive into any of that, I did want to talk a bit about the holiday season and what I've been playing. Because I did, fortunately, get an Xbox Series S for Christmas, and this is my secondary console. It's sitting right next to me here in my content creation setup. But I love this little thing, and I've been talking about it a lot on social media. I actually had a tweet that went viral. It was trending, got a little over 1,000 likes, got replies from Aaron Greenberg in the official Xbox Twitter account. But the Xbox Series S is phenomenal. The storage is a little bit limiting, but with that being said, I've installed Forza Horizon 5, Halo Infinite, Halo the Master Chief Collection, The Gunk, and Battlefield 2042 without issue. So that's a pretty good handful of big AAA games. And I plan on picking up one of those 500 gigabyte expansion cards whenever those launch in January. But this console packs a punch. I'm playing on 1440p monitor, and I genuinely can't tell that I'm not playing on a Series X. Now, of course, if you're somebody who pays attention to minute details, I'm sure you could pick out differences if you had a Digital Foundry analysis comparing them side by side. But overall, this little thing is the ultimate entry-level next-generation console. For content creators, it's ideal for capturing in 1080p and playing in 1440p. If you're streaming, you might often just stream in 720p, so this is perfect for capturing that kind of gameplay. But the performance is unmatched. I mean, we're still talking about HDR, 120 frames per second, all of the bells and whistles you could expect, backward compatibility, everything just in an all-digital little console. And we're talking about something I can hold up with one hand. It's insane how cool this little device is, and so I'm having a great time with the Xbox Series S. But one game that I've been spending a ton of time with is Battlefield 2042, and I want to talk about that more for a moment, because this is a game that has gotten a really bad rap over the course of the past about 3 months or so since it was launched, and it's gotten a bad rap justifiably. There are plenty of issues with the game. The customization menus can be confusing. The textures themselves on the maps can be a little bit lackluster. The levolution, where buildings are destroyed and maps are changed, is a huge step back from even Battlefield 4 that launched in 2013. But with all of those things being said, I'm still having a fantastic time with this game. The gunplay is some of the best that I've felt this year. And I've talked before on the podcast about how there was something for everyone this year, where Call of Duty Vanguard was your World War II shooter, and Battlefield was your modern shooter, and then Halo was your sci-fi shooter. And each of them brought something different. Battlefield is large-scale combat. Call of Duty is kind of like your traditional team deathmatch shooter, and then you have the arena shooter in Halo Infinite. And so I still find that to be true. But when it comes to me, I have been bouncing back and forth between Halo Infinite and Battlefield and can't be happier. It's taken up all of my gaming time. I haven't had a chance to play The Gunk. I haven't had a chance to play any of the games that I got for Christmas because I did get a couple of older games like Forza Horizon 3. Since that one is no longer listed on digital storefronts, I went ahead and picked that up. And I got plenty of other games like Far Cry 6 to play. But completing weekly and daily missions in Battlefield and Halo just keep me on the grind. But man, it's so much fun. And I feel like for Battlefield and for Halo, 2022 is going to be a really big year for both of these games as they continue to see support and continue to see improvements. And when these teams get back from their holiday breaks, I think you're going to be seeing some pretty big leaps forward across the board. And so, in a way, these are kind of both included in my most anticipated games of 2022 list. Not officially, of course, we'll dive into that more in a moment. But for me, it's always the long tail of the games that I look forward to the most whenever I'm talking about these various elements of a game that need to be improved. The reward system in Halo Infinite, the shop in Halo Infinite, the battle passes as the years go on. Those all need improvement. Battlefield, as I said, needs tons of improvement. But with each improvement, these games feel like entirely new experiences, and they build on this foundation that they've laid down in 2021. And so for, fear of rambling, I'll wrap this up here. Battlefield's fun. The Series S is absolutely phenomenal. In a way, I like it even more than the Series X just because of its portability and its compactness. I just adore this little console. But overwhelmingly, no matter where you're playing, it's a fantastic time to be in the Xbox ecosystem because there are plenty of big games on the way on top of those that we're all playing this holiday season. So no matter what you're playing, be looking forward to 2022 because it's going to be absolutely massive. And speaking of 2022, let's go ahead and dive into today's main topic of the show, my top 5 most anticipated games of 2022 coming to an Xbox near you. Let's start off today's show with a little game you might know of called Starfield, and this is on my most anticipated games list, not because of gameplay that we've seen, because we haven't really seen much in the way of gameplay, but it's on here because of the potential that it brings for the industry and for Xbox. This is the first major Bethesda game since the Microsoft acquisition, and so there's a ton riding on Starfield, and I think that partnership and that support from Microsoft could potentially change the game literally for Starfield. The additional funding, potentially the additional support from the team is something that I think is going to add an additional level of polish to Starfield that previous Bethesda games just simply haven't been able to achieve. And there's always this talk of Bethesda jank. And, whenever you look at Fallout 4, at launch, it was running rough. And there are still issues with that game today. Fallout 76, the same way. Elder Scrolls 5, same way. But I want something more from Starfield. I want this to feel like an entirely new Bethesda, a new era that is really building on the past Bethesda, the past wins that the team has had, but at the same time that is paving the way for the future and something that is way more impressive. And so I want to keep my expectations in check because I certainly don't want to have a repeat of Cyberpunk 2077, where the game was such a highly anticipated game that when it launched, even though it was okay, it was still broken and in a horrible state. And even the goodwill of CD Projekt Red couldn't save that game from being endlessly ridiculed by the community, even all the way until today. But I still can't help but get excited about what Starfield is bringing and what the team at Bethesda is making. And as I said, this could be a game changer for Xbox because this is the first major console exclusive that everybody really wants to play here. We're talking about, of course, we have Halo Infinite that has traditionally been an Xbox exclusive, Forza Horizon, traditionally an Xbox exclusive. But this is one of those games that people had been looking forward to across all platforms. Now that's off the table. You can play on PC, Xbox, and cloud. That's what you got. And so that kind of changed the perception of Xbox and the perception of Bethesda in the gaming community. And so this could be a console seller. This could be a generation-shaping release when it comes out in November of 2022. And so I'm looking forward to this one. And I've seen a lot of other podcasts kind of talking about the potential that this game has been finished for over a year, and they've been taking a year to add additional polish to it. And I love that idea. I want it to be true. And I suppose we will see what comes of Starfield whenever it does launch on November the 11th of 2022. Now let's jump over and talk about A Plague Tale Requiem, because this is one of the best games. Now let's jump over and talk about A Plague Tale Requiem. This is a game that I've been looking forward to since the moment that I finished A Plague Tale Innocence. And if you haven't played Innocence, you need to. It's on Game Pass. That's where I played it earlier this year. I was out of work for a couple of days when I was sick, and I was able to just sit down and enjoy this game in full. And Amicia and Hugo are fantastic main characters, and their story is very endearing. It's about this bond between a sister and a brother that even the biggest forces can't really break, and they stick with each other to the end. And so I look forward to seeing that relationship continue to be built and this world continue to be fleshed out. And just from the trailer alone, one thing that I'm noticing is that the locations that this pair is in is much more diverse than what we saw in A Plague Tale: Innocence. And I think that the landscapes are much more beautiful, the worlds are much more robust, but overall, that same combat is clearly present. The same ferocity that Amicia brings with her combat, the same gruesome gore that you got from rats eating people alive in Innocence, that's all present, and I love each of those elements. But on top of that, this game is coming to Game Pass on day one, alongside other big Microsoft exclusives like Starfield, like Redfall, that kind of thing. And so for me, this game represents a very strong third-party lineup coming to Game Pass in the new year. You have a lot of partnerships that are continuing, and a lot of new games that are coming to this service that cost people $15 a month. And I think that is a fantastic benefit that a lot of people look over when it comes to Game Pass. These biggest releases like Halo Infinite and Forza Horizon 5 are wonderful, but you also have these huge AA kind of games from Asobo Studio and so many others. On top of that, with indies. And this game for me represents a high quality experience that millions of people are looking forward to that is accessible because of Game Pass. And I think that is a huge win. But looking beyond the subscription value that it's bringing, this is just going to be a beautiful game. Love it. Can't wait to get my hands on it in 2022. You know I can't talk about my top 5 most anticipated games of the year without talking about Hellblade 2 Senua's Saga, because this, for me, is the first true next-gen showcase, and it stole the show at the Game Awards 2021. And when you look at games that have come out already, Forza Horizon 5 is the best looking game on the Xbox Series X to date. If you flip the script and you look at PlayStation, I would say Horizon Forbidden West is going to be pushing boundaries with the PlayStation 5. But ultimately, both of those games have last generation versions, and there are other examples as well. I think about Miles Morales, I think about Halo Infinite. These are games that have last generation versions, even though they've gotten upgrades for the next gen as well. Hellblade is showcasing what's possible when you focus entirely on leveraging every bit of the power of next-generation hardware, and you finally leave the Xbox One behind, and you focus entirely on making the best-looking game possible. And on top of that, you have fantastic gameplay if it's anything like what happened in Senua's Sacrifice. But on top of that, you also have a beautifully told narrative. And for me, Hellblade is Xbox's answer to God of War. And you kind of see that in the trailer that was shown off at the Game Awards, where you have this giant mythical beast that is connecting with Senua, and that has this backstory with Senua that is built upon. And this kind of game that brings together story and gameplay and absolutely gorgeous visuals. I mean, look at those water movements. This is when you get something that is a transformative experience. This is when you push the medium forward, and that's what's happening here in Hellblade 2. As I said, this game is in my top 5, but the entire list isn't technically ranked. If I had to be pressed, though, Hellblade 2 is absolutely my most anticipated game of 2022. I've said that on a podcast before. I think I've said that on Twitter as well. But when it comes to looks, this is by far the first game that I've seen that is truly capturing what the next generation can do. And I cannot wait for this one to launch in 2022. As I said, hopefully all of these games launch in 2022. As it stands, currently slated, boy, no matter when it comes out, I cannot wait to play this one. Who's ready to save Gotham? Because Gotham Knights is shaping up to be one of the biggest games of 2022. And it's kind of weird how DC is releasing their games, because we have Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, both releasing in the same year, hypothetically, again, assuming these dates hold up. But Gotham Knights, for me, is an iteration on what Arkham City and Arkham Knight have brought. Batman is gone. you now have these other characters from DC's past in the lore. You have Batgirl here featured in the trailer that you are able to play as. But what I love about Gotham Knights is that it expands to bring co-op into the mix. As you can see from the trailer, Robin is about to jump in and join the fight here. But it also creates a single player experience that makes this something that I personally want to play because I'm not a big co-op player. And one thing that I worry about with Suicide Squad is that it will feel very co-op heavy. And that's something that I worry about with Redfall as well. I would love to play Redfall in the same way that I would love to play Back 4 Blood, but I just don't really enjoy playing with people. Whenever you're talking about getting a squad together, it's just not really my cup of tea. Not a big fan of that. But for Gotham Knights, it feels like they've taken the co-op nature of the game and they have kind of opened that up to not only allow for co-op, but also to expand for or to allow for expanded player options when it comes to how they play the game and who they play the game as. You know, if you enjoy Batgirl, you can primarily main Batgirl and then jump over to Robin if you'd like and kind of play that way to add some diversity to the gameplay. But as you can see from the gameplay here, you still have those core fundamental foundational mechanics that Arkham Knight and Arkham City brought that so many people are familiar with an expanded arsenal of weapons and combat styles. It's just shaping up to be a very, very good looking game, and it's one that I'm looking forward to playing in 2022 as somebody who is a huge fan of the Batman games. And speaking of the Batman games, I'd be remiss not to mention how much these games have inspired some of the biggest games across the board. I mean, without Arkham, you wouldn't really have Marvel Spider-Man in the way that you have it today. You really wouldn't have any kind of Miles Morales kind of experience on the PlayStation 5. That game just wouldn't be the same. And to some degree, you could say that Batman was inspired by stuff like Spider-Man Web of Shadows, and there are plenty of superhero games that have come in the past, like Infamous on the PlayStation side of things, that have certainly opened this world up and made this something special. But when it comes to realism, when it comes to believability, when it comes to how I think a superhero would actually play in the real world, this game feels incredibly grounded. And on top of that, aesthetically, it looks just gorgeous. And so Gotham Knights is absolutely in my top 5 most anticipated of the year because of the narratives that are going to be told, because of the player options, the co-op options, compatibility, I should say, and just plenty of potential here for future expansions and for cool stories to be told. So Gotham Knights, certainly want to keep your eye on in the year ahead. Now, to pair with these giant AAA games, we have a little indie called Tunic to round out today's top 5 list, because this is a game that I've gone hands-on with in multiple ID at Xbox showcases, and it is so satisfying, but at the same time so simplistic, and I think that's something that a lot of games kind of lose as they become more popular. They add complexity. And with Tunic, a lot of the items you discover, they aren't even in English. You can't even read what these actually do. You just know it's a key for a specific door, or you open a chest and you get these blocks, whatever it might be. That kind of simplicity makes this game so approachable that it's easy to pick up, incredibly easy to pick up. The combat is simple, but the complexities, the rhythm of the game, it adds so much depth. And on top of that, the art style itself is not only gorgeous, but it also makes this world feel very alive. It's just a very unique indie game, and it's one that does so many things incredibly well that a lot of games miss. And that is just creating an experience that's very welcoming, that is simple, but that is very, very satisfying. And so if you ever get the chance to play the demo, I highly recommend checking out the Tunic demo. I probably played it about 4 or 5 times before the ID at Xbox showcase kind of wrapped up. But very, very cool game. Beautiful art, very satisfying combat, and certainly on my list to check out in 2022. In a way, and I'm hesitant to say this because it's kind of setting this game up to hit a big mark, this is going to be 2022's Death's Door, and Death's Door is one of the biggest indies of 2021. Tons of people have been talking about it throughout the year, nominated for multiple Game of the Year awards, if I remember correctly. But what shocked a lot of people about Death's Door is that it was so accessible and simple, but it added something that kept the player coming back and added a nice amount of challenge. And I think that's a lot like what you're going to be seeing here with Tunic. So keep this one on your radar, check it out. Definitely worth looking into in the year ahead. And so with that, the first episode of Xhibition for the year is officially in the books. And as I said, thank you guys so much for jumping on board and getting into the podcast in 2021. And I'm very much so looking forward to not only playing these games in 2022, but enjoying them with you all and sharing my thoughts here on the podcast and listening to you all in the community and making YouTube shorts and TikToks and just creating things together. Very excited for what the year has in store. And I'm going to start lining up more interviews and guests to have on the show to talk more about our love of Xbox and the games that are coming out on the systems, because the generation is just getting started. You know, we're just over a year into the Xbox Series X and S life cycles, and we've got another decade to go. There are so many awesome experiences coming, and between these games that we've talked about here today and the expansions and continued work on games that released in 2021 and the growth of stuff like competitive Halo, it's so exciting to be into the world of Xbox and into the world of gaming. Very exciting year ahead. But until next time, you guys have a fantastic first week of 2022. I'll talk to you soon, and keep on playing.